All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Ephraim. Today's date September 18th, 2021. I'm saying Ahaya by Yeshim, Yeshua, HaMashiach, Baruch Atah Adonai. And if you're listening to the sound of my voice, you are blessed to see yet another day. And for that, all praise, honor, glory is due to the Most High God of Israel for now and forever. All right, Shabbat Shalawam, elect. Today on this Shabbat, I am going to cover the life and the death of a young man by the name of Mr. George Stinney Jr. I mentioned him in the lesson from yesterday when I did the brief documentary on what sparked the whole civil rights movement by then President Harry Truman with the blinding of Isaac Woodard, and I mentioned the George Stinney incident in that piece yesterday. So I know many of you have probably never heard of George Stinney Jr., right? I mean, there's so many that we've never heard of. We know of the more quote unquote popular ones, right? Like the four little girls, the church bombing, the lynching of Mary Turner, Emmett Till, and the list goes on as far as the ones that we actually know that got some national attention, but there's so many others that didn't, right? It didn't get national attention, man. Like I said, I highly recommend you guys getting the PBS app or the channel, however it works. I got mine through what's that, Prime Video? That's what I got mine through, or whatever. I mean, it's worth it, especially for those who are interested in documentaries and learning. I'm an educator, right? But more importantly than that, I'm a learner. I'm a consummate learner. I'll never stop learning, especially as it relates to the history of my people, right? So that's that. But I felt led to go ahead and do one on Mr. George Stinney Jr. When I first got wind of this, man, it really touched me. I couldn't believe that South Carolina was so evil. They would actually electrocute a 14-year-old child, man, railroad him for a crime he did not commit, ran his family off. He didn't have no support. He was alone. There's a movie kind of loosely based on that called Carolina Skeletons with Lou Gossett Jr. But I didn't appreciate that movie because, I mean, they threw some Green Beret, some Hollywood stuff. I mean, it was a bunch of bull crap, man. I wasn't feeling that. But that's what that movie was based on. The electrocution of George Stinney Jr., who was only 14 when he was electrocuted. So we're going to get into that and see what happened, and we're going to get into the posthumous him being cleared of that crime, and also there was a supposedly a deathbed confession from some old pedophile who actually admitted to killing those two little girls or whatever. And George Stinney Jr. was a very small 14-year-old boy. He was small. They say he was so small he couldn't even fit in the electric chair, man. I mean, listen, I don't have no shame in saying it. When I first read that, I mean, the tears just started coming down my eyes like it happened yesterday. You know what I'm saying? I don't feel no way about that because, I mean, I just couldn't believe they would do that to that baby, man. I mean, just the sheer evil and just the disregard. And the scripture said it, so they would not show favor to our young or our old, man. If this ain't the curses, I don't know what is, man. Negroes, y'all better wake up. Like, seriously, y'all better wake up, man. Because we are living, breathing remnants of the curses of the book of Deuteronomy. I mean, straight up and down. So, let's go ahead and get into that. South Carolina electrocuting the youngest person ever put to death in this country at 14 years old, George Stinney Jr. Let's get it. George Junius Stinney Jr. was born October 21st, 1929, and he was executed June 16th, 1944. He was an African-American young man who at the age of 14 was convicted in a proceeding later vacated as an unfair trial in 2014 of murdering two white girls, Betty June Beneker, age 11, and Mary Emma Thames, age 7. in his hometown of Alkaloo, South Carolina. He was executed by electric chair in June of 1944, thus becoming the youngest American with an exact birthday confirmed to be sentenced to death and executed in the 20th century. A re-examination of Stinney's case began in 2004, and several individuals in the Northeastern University School of Law sought a judicial review. Stinney's conviction was overturned in 2014, 70 years after he was executed, when a court ruled that he had not received a fair trial, effectively clearing his name. About the murders. On March 23, 1944, the bodies of two young girls, Betty June Benniger and Mary Emma Thames, were discovered in Alkaloo, South Carolina. The girls had gone missing the day before, as they never returned home the previous night. Benniger and Thames both suffered severe, blunt force trauma, resulting in penetration of both the girls' skulls. In 1944, George Stinney lived in Alkaloo, South Carolina with his father, George Stinney Sr., and his mother, Amy, brothers John, 17, and Charles, 12, and sisters Catherine, 10, and Amy, 7. Stinney's father worked in the town sawmill, and the family resided in company housing. Alkaloo was a small working-class mill town where white and black neighborhoods were separated by railroad tracks. The town was typical of small southern towns of the time. Given segregated schools and churches for white and black residents, there was limited interaction between them. The bodies of Betty June Benniger and Mary Emma Thames were found in a ditch on March 23, 1944, after failing to return home the night before. The bodies were discovered on the African-American side of Alkaloo. Stinney's father helped in the search. The girls had been beaten with a weapon, variously reported as a piece of blunt metal or a railroad spike. The girls were last seen riding their bicycles looking for flowers. As they passed Stinney's property, they had asked Stinney and his sister Amy if they knew where to find maypops, a local name for passion flowers. According to Amy, she was with Stinney at the time the police later established for the murders. According to an article reported by the Wire Service on March 24, 1944, and published widely, with the mistake of the boy's name preserved, the sheriff announced the arrest of George Junius and stated that the boy had confessed and led officers to a hidden piece of iron. Both girls had suffered blunt force trauma to the face and head. Reports differed as to what kind of weapon had been used. According to a report by the medical examiner, these wounds had been inflicted by a blunt instrument with a round head about the size of a hammer. Both girls' skulls were punctured. The medical examiner reported no evidence of sexual assault to the younger girl, though the genitalia of the older girl was slightly bruised. Both girls' hymens remained intact at the time of the autopsies. George Stinney Jr. and his older brother John were arrested on suspicion of murdering the girls. John was released by police, but George was held in custody. He was not allowed to see his parents until after his trial and conviction. According to a handwritten statement, Stinney's arresting officer was H.S. Newman, a Clarendon County deputy, who stated, quote, "I arrested a boy by the name of George Stinney. He then made a confession and told me where to find a piece of iron about 15 inches where he said he put in a ditch about 6 feet from the bicycle." No confession statement signed by Stinney is known to exist. The 14-year-old later claimed that the arresting officer starved him and then bribed him with food to confess. Stinney was reported to have gotten into fights at school, including a fight where he scratched a girl with a knife. This assertion by Stinney's 7th grade teacher, who was African American, was disputed by Amy Stinney Ruffner when it was reported in 1995. A local white woman who remembered Stinney from childhood claimed in 2014 that he had threatened to kill her. Oh my God. And a friend the day before the murder, and that he was known as a bully. Following Stinney's arrest, his father was fired from his job at the local sawmill, and that the Stinney family had to immediately vacate their company housing. The family feared for their safety. Stinney's parents did not see him again before the trial. He had no support during his 81-day confinement and trial. He was detained at a jail in Columbia, 50 miles from Alcalá, due to the risk of lynching. Stinney was questioned alone, without his parents or an attorney. Although the Sixth Amendment guarantees legal counsel, this was not routinely observed until the United States Supreme Court's 1963 ruling in Gideon v. Wainwright that explicitly required representation through the course of criminal proceedings. The entire proceeding against Stinney, including jury selection, took 1 day. Stinney's court-appointed counsel was Charles Plowden, a tax commissioner campaigning for election to local office. Plowden did not challenge the 3 police officers who testified that Stinney confessed to the 2 murders. He also did not challenge the prosecution's presentation of 2 differing versions of Stinney's verbal confession. In one version, Stinney was attacked by the girls after he tried to help one girl who had fallen in the ditch, and he killed them in self-defense. In the other version, he had followed the girls, first attacking Mary Emma and then Betty June. There is no written record of Stinney's confession, apart from Deputy Newman's statement. Other than the testimony of the 3 police officers, at trial, prosecutors called 3 witnesses: Reverend Francis Batson, who discovered the bodies of the 2 girls, and the 2 doctors who performed the post-mortem examination. The court allowed discussion of the possibility of rape due to bruising of Binnicker's genitalia. Stinney's counsel did not call any witnesses, did not cross-examine witnesses, and offered little or no defense at all. The trial presentation lasted 2.5 hours. More than 1,000 whites crowded the courtroom, but no blacks were allowed. As was typical at the time, Stinney was tried before an all-white jury. In 1944, most African Americans in the South were prohibited from voting and therefore ineligible to serve on juries. After deliberating for fewer than 10 minutes, the jury found Stinney guilty of both murders. Judge Philip H. Stowe sentenced Stinney to death by electrocution. There is no transcript of the trial, and no appeal was filed by Stinney's counsel. Stinney's family, churches, and the NAACP appealed to Governor Olin D. Johnson for clemency, given the age of the boy. Others urged the governor to let the execution proceed, which he did. Johnston wrote a response to one appeal for clemency, but the autopsy proved the allegations therein to be false. It may be interesting for you to know that Stinney killed the smaller girl to rape the larger one. Then he killed the larger girl and raped her dead body. Oh my God, come on. Oh my God, man, this is tough. This is tough, man, for me to read this. 20 minutes later, he returned and attempted to rape her again, but her body was too cold. This is some foolishness, man. This is just, oh my God, man. Stinney was executed on June 16th, 1944 at 7:30 p.m. He was prepared for execution by electric chair using a Bible as a booster seat. Stinney was executed on June 16th, 1944 at 7:30 p.m. He was prepared for execution by electric chair using a Bible as a booster seat because Stinney was too small for the chair. He was then restrained by his arms, legs, and body to the chair. His father was only allowed to approach the electric chair to say his final words to his son, and an officer asked George if he had any last words to say before the execution took place, but he only shook his head. The executioner pulled a strap from the chair and placed it over George's mouth, causing him to break into tears. He then placed the face mask over his face, which did not fit, as he continued crying. When the lethal electricity was applied, the mask covering slipped off, revealing tears streaming down Stinney's face. He was buried in an unmarked grave in Crowley. In 2004, George Frierson, a local historian who grew up in Alkaloo, started researching the case, and in 2004, George Frierson, a local historian who grew up in Alkaloo, started researching the case after reading a newspaper article about it. His work gained the attention of South Carolina lawyers Steve McKenzie and Matt Burgess. In addition, Ray Brown, attorney James Moon, and others contributed countless hours of research and review of historical documents and found witnesses and evidence to assist in exonerating Stinney. Among those who aided the case were the Civil Rights and Restorative Justice Project at the Northeastern University School of Law, which filed an amicus brief with the court in 2014. Frierson and the pro bono lawyers first sought relief through the Pardon and Parole Board of South Carolina. McKenzie and Burgess, along with attorney Ray Chandler representing Stinney's family, filed a motion for a new trial on October 25, 2013. If we can get the case reopened, we can go to the judge and say, there wasn't any reason to convict this child. There was no evidence to present to the jury. There was no transcript. This case needs to be reopened. This is an injustice that needs to be righted. I'm pretty optimistic that if we can get the witnesses we need to come forward, we will be successful in court. We hopefully have a witness that's going to say, that's non-family, non-relative witness, who's going to be able to tie all of this and say that they were basically an alibi witness. They were there with Mr. Stinney, and this did not occur. Steve McKenzie. Frierson stated in interviews, there has been a person that has been named as being the culprit who is now deceased, and it was said by the family that there was a deathbed confession by that man. Frierson said that the rumored culprit came from a well-known, prominent white family. A member or members of that family had served on the initial coroner's inquest jury, which had recommended that Stinney be prosecuted. In his amicus brief, the CRRJ said, there is compelling evidence that George Stinney Jr. was innocent of the crimes for which he was executed for in 1944. The prosecutor relied almost exclusively on one piece of evidence to obtain a conviction in this capital case: the unrecorded, unsigned, quote-unquote, confession of a 14-year-old who was deprived of counsel and parental guidance, and whose defense lawyer shockingly failed to call exculpatory witnesses or to preserve his right to appeal. Yeah, I'm gonna end this this documentary lesson right there. This will probably be the last time I actually address this story. I mean, it's too emotional, man. I mean, really, it's just the gravity of just what they did to that child, and I mean, just And even though this so-called judge exonerated him in 2004, she still kind of threw dirt on his name, talking about he very well could have, whatever. But so even in so-called exonerating him, still tried to kick dirt on this young man's name and his. I mean, I can't with this, man. I can't, But for all of you who were able to kind of get through it and checked it out to the very end, listening to me right now, salute. Because as a black person, I mean, Negro or not, I mean, even non-black, I mean, how can you not have empathy, for what happened to this young man, right? I mean, going as far as to say that they had to use a Bible for a booster seat, man. Oh my God, listen, that's beyond me, man. I can't, you know what I mean? Like I can't, but I say that, the Most High knows exactly what they did. And, the Most High knows, how wrong it was of what they did to him. The look on his face, man, says it all. In his little mug shots or whatever. It's just, just no kind of regard for our children. I mean, the scripture said it. They will not show any favor to our young or our old. And our people are living, breathing proof of that. So with that, I'm going to say, rest in heaven, George Stinney Jr. I'm so sorry that they did that to you, but may the Most High eternally bless your soul and keep and cover his descendants that I'm sure that never got like one day of peace of mind or rest since that happened. So on that note, brothers, sisters, sojourners, and supporters, I'm going to end this presentation until next time. This is Dr. Ephraim signing off. Saying Hayya by Yeshem, Yeshua HaMashiach, Baruch Atah Adonai, Shabbat Shalawam, elect.